This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Well, hello there. Come on in, you guys. We're on the eve of Bryan Kohberger's sentencing. Is he going to speak? The President of the United States has weighed in on this whole thing. What does that mean? What is Bryan Kohberger going to be wearing tomorrow? Is he going to be in a suit? Is he going to be in a jumpsuit? And what in the world did Michael Kohberger, what was he thinking when he was talking to his neighbor? Come on in, tell me where you're from, and let's get started. My name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you have not subscribed to Reporter Room, well, it's free. It's free, and I can't get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. So please join the Reporter Room family and subscribe, like, share, leave a comment, and know that everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion. Let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about Bryan Kohberger's sentencing. We're going to be talking about the fact that the President of the United States has weighed in. We're going to talk about new information regarding Bryan Kohberger's parents, specifically what Michael Kohberger said to one of the neighbors. And we have a statement from James Patterson, co-author Vicky Ward, and we're going to talk about that as well. So come on in, tell me where you are from. You can tell me what city, what state, what country, what planet, if you want to, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. So let's go ahead and let me grab this, because this has been a absolutely crazy 24 hours. Let me take this down, pop this one up. I was not expecting the President of the United States to weigh in on this. So I did not have that on my bingo card at all. Let me make myself a little smaller so I'm not blocking you. There we go. Okay, so my state source on this is the Idaho Statesman. So President Donald Trump on Monday. So this would have just been 2 days. Now the sentencing is tomorrow. I'm going to be streaming it at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So you'll want to watch it, I hope, here on Reporter Room. I don't talk at all when the court is in proceedings. I do type with you guys in the top chat, but I don't talk because I absolutely hate it when somebody's reacting over a courtroom live stream. So I just don't do that. But President Donald Trump weighed in just right before yesterday, actually. So 2 days before Bryan Kohberger is scheduled to be sentenced in this trial. And he said, quote, "These were vicious schmurders," I'm watching my words, "with so many questions left unanswered." So he posted this on Truth Social, which is a social media platform similar to Twitter that is owned by him. He said, "While life imprisonment is tough, it's certainly better than receiving capital punishment," he said, DP. "But before sentencing, I hope the judge makes Kohberger at minimum, you guys, explain why he did these horrible schmurders." And you guys, I think this is absolutely amazing that he has come out and said this. So let's go over to News Nation next. So News Nation also ran with the story. And so we know that Bryan Kohberger did already plead guilty. He also signed a confession. And tomorrow we're going to get to hear from the victims. We're going to hear the victim impact statements. And my understanding is that speaking on behalf of the Gonzalez family is going to be their eldest daughter, Olivia. She's going to be speaking. But I don't know, now that President Trump has come out, Steve was feeling like he said he had thought he failed Kaylee. Steve Gonzalez thought he failed his daughter, that he wasn't able, to get this all the way down the court where he wanted, into a capital punishment case. He hadn't been able to get this to trial. And, he was really did want to have a trial because he wants to know why. He wants to know what happened to his daughter. He wants to know what happened to Maddie and Kaylee and Ethan and Xana. So he, and now that Trump is siding with the family members, which I thought was really interesting. So he said "I hope the judge makes Kohberger at the minimum explain why he did these horrible murders. There are no explanations. There is no nothing. People were shocked that he was able to plea bargain. But the judge should make him explain what happened. And then he puts, thank you for your attention to this matter. So I think this was a shot across the bow, in my opinion, toward the judge in this case. What do you guys think? If you think that he was speaking directly to the judge in this case, put a 1 in the chat. If you think he was just making a general statement, put a 2 in the chat. But I'm just wondering how well the judge slept last night after reading that, because technically, I don't think the judge is allowed to have input from outside sources. And I would think that this would include the president of the United States. But it, in the 2 years, this is the News Nation, in the 2 years since Kohberger's arrest, his attorneys unsuccessfully attempted to prevent prosecutors from seeking capital punishment and challenge the DNA evidence, leaving a plea deal as their final alternative to spare his life before the start of the trial in August. And at least one of the family members, we know that it is the Gonzalez family. We've also heard that the Kernodle family also did not want to settle this. But 2 of the family members, the Chapins and Maddie Mogan's family, the Laramie's, were comfortable with the settling. So the prosecutor was left with a 50-50 split. Probably was, that's quite a quandary to be in. But other people supported this agreement. Bryan Kohberger is going to have to serve 4 life sentences plus 10 years, and they will be served one after the other, after the other, after the other, so consecutively. So that was News Nation on it, and let me pull up Newsweek, as I just thought this was absolutely wild. Then we're going to talk about what Michael Kohberger said to the neighbor next. So there we have the judge. We're going to be seeing it tomorrow. And they're talking again what Donald Trump posted. He feels like what happened was vicious and that there are so many questions that were left unanswered. And although he thinks that life in prison is tough, he doesn't think it's enough. It sounds like, or at least he wants to know what he wants Bryan Kohberger to have to explain what happened. Now, I don't know. The judge's office told Newsweek in an email yesterday that per judicial canons, the judge is not allowed to comment on active cases. And Newsweek also reached out to the Gonzalez family through Facebook and BK's defense attorney, Ann Taylor, via email for comment. And so why does this matter? Well, I think it would help the Gonzalez family and the Kernodle family in that they want to know why. But requiring a defendant to explain their motives voluntarily is rare. They retain the right to remain silent at sentencing, and courts must balance this with public calls for clarity. This high-profile attempt at intervention by a president has intensified the spotlight on both the legal process and the broader debate over the case. This really has been tough. We have a lot of people that feel like they're glad because there's no guarantee if we had gone to trial that he would have been found guilty. They could have had one juror. That's all Ann Taylor needed, that believed in conspiracy theories and, believed in the tunnels under the house and believed in the Green Elantra. And that would have meant he was found not, could have been hung jury or not been found not guilty if that juror was persuasive enough, or they could have found him guilty, but still not imposed capital punishment. So Bryan Kohberger's plea deal was just weeks before his trial was supposed to begin, and he was able to avoid capital punishment. So a lot of people are feeling like he should have been made to allocute. He should have been made to stand up and say what he did. Now, he did say that he had done away with Kaylee. He had done away, I'm watching my words, with Ethan. He had done away with Maddie. He had done away with Xana. He did say that. He did plead guilty to all of those. The judge asked him questions, and that's to keep Bryan Kohberger from able to he could try to appeal, but the prosecutor will then show the court the fact that he promised that, that part of the agreement was that he wouldn't appeal. So unless he has some kind of egregious grounds, like the judge suddenly changed the sentencing to capital punishment, Bryan Kohberger is not going to get to a hearing on that. So he can appeal all he wants, but it doesn't mean that the court system is going to accept it. So nobody knows what the motive is. We don't know why Dylan and Bethany were spared. We can guess, and as I've shared with you in the past, my educated guess is that Dylan and Bethany are still here because they did not come out of their rooms. I honestly think that had Xana not gotten that DoorDash delivery and come out, she might, and Ethan might have still be here, and we might have an Idaho 2 and not a 4. Had Dylan come out when she saw an intruder in the house, if she hadn't just frozen, she might not be here. She didn't scream, she didn't call out, she just froze, which is a really common reaction. So the plea deal has divided not just the families, but the true crime community, with some people feeling like it's a good thing. We have for sure 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years. He's for sure going to jail. While other people feel like, no, it's not enough. If this isn't a capital punishment case, what is? And a lot of people feel like the families deserve and the public deserves an explanation. Remember, it's the taxpayers of Idaho who have funded not just the prosecution, but also Bryan Kohberger's defense. So he waited and ran up millions of dollars in money to fund the defense and prosecution, only to plead guilty when nothing else was working. So his sentencing hearing is tomorrow. I'm going to be beginning here at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I hope to see you here in the top chat. I hope you want to watch it with me. But he no longer holds the presumption of innocence. So the judge has decided that Bryan Kohberger will be appearing for the first time since he was arrested in jail-issued clothing on camera for the sentencing hearing. He'll be appearing in person in court, and he will also be appearing in a prison jumpsuit. So it's unclear if Bryan Kohberger is going to speak at the sentencing. I doubt he will. I did not see, in my opinion, any sympathy or empathy for the victims. He pled guilty. He didn't even make eye contact with any of the family or just say, "I'm so sorry," nothing. Maybe he will say something tomorrow. I'm not holding my breath, but you never know. But the family of the victims, they will finally get to have their say at this tomorrow. Now, my understanding is that Steve and Christy Gonzalez are not going to speak, and the Chapins are not supposed to come. But I'm wondering, now that the president of the United States has spoken out, if maybe Steve and Christy might change their mind and might want to come forward and speak, because Steve really just felt like he had let his daughter down. And I think the fact that this has started a national and maybe even an international conversation about victims' rights and how do they weigh with the rights of the person who's being accused. So weighing victims' rights with the defendant's rights, how do we weigh that out? Can we do a better job moving forward? So this is what Bryan Kohberger's attorney has said. Martin Soto Diaz, he's an attorney. This is Michael Kohberger, not Bryan Kohberger's family, in a statement to CBS News following the guilty plea. So this was right after the guilty plea. He said, in light of recent developments, the Kohbergers are asking members of the media for privacy and respect and responsible judgment at this time. We continue to allow the legal process to unfold with respect to all parties and will not release any comments or take any questions. Now, Aubrey Gonzalez, they're not to be confused with Kaylee's oldest sister. This would be Kaylee's youngest sister, Aubrey. She is only 18 years old. She wrote in a social media post following the plea deal, the introduction of this plea deal just weeks before the scheduled trial is both shocking and cruel. And a lot of people, do feel like that. And I do think that, here we are, we're having an international conversation about this case. And I think it's really important. I think it's a conversation that deserves to be had. Let's see what you guys think about that. And then we're going to talk about this weird statement that Michael Kohberger has made, you guys. Just when you thought it couldn't get any more weird, it does. I'm looking for 1s and 2s. So come on in. Tell me where you're from. If you put a thumbs up in the chat, Please tell me what number thumbs up you are also. Okay, here we go. I got it. All right. And I do want to say thank you to Michael for being one of our head mods. And thank you to NJAS also. Thank you, Kathleen, for modding today, too. All right. So let's see where we are. Thank you for modding today, Barbara. She says she's number 47 on the thumbs up. Thanks for modding today, Kathleen. Tammy, it's good to see you. Yeah, Elsa, Steve did it fail Kaylee? He's an awesome. I think she meant to say did not fail Kaylee. I agree. And I think the fact that we're having this international conversation about this topic and whether or not families need to be included a little bit more thoughtfully in the process, I think is a really good sign for justice. We do need to find a balance for that. C says the judge isn't affected by outside influence. The judge will follow the law. I think he will too, because he doesn't want to get overturned on appeal, right? By forcing Bryan Kohberger to do something that could cause the conviction to be overturned. Dion said, maybe President Trump has been watching you, Jessica. Oh my goodness. Thank you for modding today, Chrissy. I don't know. I have no idea what he's watching. I have no idea. Wicked says, do you Judge Hippler is going to take Trump's comment? Okay, so this is what I think. This is just my opinion, you guys. I don't see how he can't have been thinking about it. There's just no way. I doubt he slept well last night. I think he probably had a very rough night's sleep. We've had a lot of talk from a lot of different sources, including Howard Blum, who said he felt like the powers that be wanted this case to go away. And you know, that we had the University of Idaho be allowed to just literally tear down the crime scene. I believe personally that WSU got tipped off on December 19th, which is why that the same day that Bryan Kohberger was known as a suspect to Moscow police, who we know now that he did speak to the Pullman PD, who now, that chief of police, who now happens to be the chief of police for Washington State University. I do believe that the state of Washington was tipped off that Bryan Kohberger was a suspect, which is why his termination letter is also December 19th. And they wanted this to go away, in my opinion, because they hired this guy. And as I've shared with you in the past, they did not check with his employers. I know that employers can't say, you know, somebody did a bad job or something like that, but they can definitely tell you the date they started working and the date they ended working. And as I've shared with you, Bryan Kohberger's resume, there's a lot of fudged dates in there. And even when the WSU students, these female students and male students too, were coming forward and saying that he was grading females differently than males, that would be a chance for HR to go through and try to find a reason to let him go. And one of the reasons they could find is checking back in with those employers, which in my opinion was not done prior to his hiring, with checking those dates and making sure he didn't lie about anything, because that would have been a reason to get rid of him. Instead, he wasn't gotten rid of until he had an altercation with his male professor, multiple, but and then he was terminated on December 19th, which is well after Bryan had left. He had left with his dad before final exams even began, when one of his responsibilities would have been to administer final exams, and another responsibility would have been to help grade papers. So the fact that he and his dad took this planned road trip is impressive. So to get back to your question, Wicket, do I think he's going to take Trump's comment into consideration? I'm sure it's in on his mind, but I don't think he's going to risk being overturned. Even though I think he's probably feeling tremendous pressure, I don't think he's going to be risk being overturned on an appeal by forcing Bryan Kohberger to speak. So no, I do not think Bryan Kohberger, he could speak tomorrow. He could decide to allocute, but I don't think the judge can force him to. Should it have been put in the plea deal? In my opinion, yeah. Just thinking about how the families have reacted, I think that would have been a good thing. And you know, this is something that maybe, I mean, he did plead guilty. He did sign a confession, but the family wants to know, why did he do it? So I think doing a detailed allocution would have been helpful. But how much can he really take the president into consideration? He can't force him. He can't force him. Hey, Veronica. Michael put a 1. Thank you for the thumbs up. Christy was a number 28 thumbs up. That's good of the president, says Kathleen. 1 from 1, 1, 1, 1. Oh, this is a lot of ones. 1, 2. Susie Q has a 2. Adrian says, be nice if the president invited the families to the White House. That's why I think Steve Christie, in my opinion, should speak out. Because this is what I feel like. I feel like a national conversation, an international conversation is being had right now. And I think that Steve Christie are an important part of that conversation. And I know they don't think that anything they have to say to Bryan Kohberger is going to mean anything because they don't think he feels any remorse or empathy. And I agree with that. But I do think that they could come forward and talk about that maybe that a law that, speak out with international publicity at the hearing tomorrow. During their time, they could come forward and say that they do, they would like, and maybe they're going to do this through Olivia, but I think it would be good to come out and just, continue that conversation and weigh in on that conversation that maybe we need some legislation that you can't do a plea deal for a capital punishment case without allocution, without the person that's being allowed to plead guilty to be able to have to say what they did. Said, I think he was speaking directly to the judge. I agree. Thank you for sharing that. So seems like most all of you think it is. I saw 1, 2. Oh, I see another 2 here. Let me see. PJ put 2. So thank you for modding today, Barbara. So everybody thinks he was speaking to the judge, except for just a couple of people. Thank you for modding today, Leslie. All right, so let's continue. And I want to talk about what Michael said to the neighbor. And I do want to thank you, Michael Cole, for the $1.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. I'm using that for a new camera. And hopefully you will see the new camera, not at tomorrow's live stream, but at one of the first one that we do next week. Thank you, Enjaz, for the gifted reporter membership. That is so nice of you. And thank you, Nick C, for the $10 super sticker. Nick says, BK won't speak. He'll stare off. There's no gain for him if he speaks tomorrow. BK has all the cards about what he did and will cash in while incarcerated. He'll need some excitement during his life. I agree with you, Nick. I think you are right. I don't think he's going to, if he says anything, maybe he would say he was sorry, but I don't even know at this point if anybody is going to believe him. Lori says the judge is probably going to be irritated. He does not like being told what to do. Right. But I don't think he's going to come out. Thank you, Christy. I don't think he's going to come out like he did last time when people were calling in and emailing. I don't think he's going to come out like that. After the president, let me know what you think, because this judge is in an elected position. He's up for re-election in 2027. Al says, I don't think Bryan will speak unless he gets a prison-paid interview. Alice agrees. C says, no, nothing equals something. Yes, I'm a grammar stuff. Okay. Destiny, that's okay. Destiny said, did you say Trump's opinion is life isn't enough? I said that he didn't say that. Let me just say what he said. I don't want to misquote the president. He said that Bryan Kohberger, who is responsible, so there's no conspiracy nonsense coming from the president of the United States. And remember, he has access to information that we don't have access to yet. Bryan Kohberger, who is responsible in Idaho for the deaths of 4 wonderful young souls, has made a plea bargain in order to avoid the DP. These were vicious murders with so many questions left unanswered. While imprisonment is tough, it's certainly better than receiving DP. But before sentencing, I hope the judge makes Kohberger, at minimum, explain why he did these horrible murders. There is no explanation. There is nothing, and he's got nothing in all caps. People were shocked that he was able to plea bargain, but the judge should make him explain what happened. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So that is what Trump said verbatim. So I just didn't want to paraphrase what he said or in any way, because it's a president. And thank you, Florence, for the $2.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. That is very kind of you. So I think he was speaking, in my opinion. Now that you guys gave yours, I'll just share mine. I think he was speaking directly to the judge. I think the judge is not allowed to take it into consideration. He can't force Bryan Kohberger, but man, oh man, this probably cost him a night's sleep, maybe 2 nights, maybe tonight too, tossing and turning, just wondering what if Trump is going to post something else about him tomorrow. It's gotta be worried. Okay, so I want to talk about Michael Kohberger. So let's talk about this conversation that Michael Kohberger had about Bryan last summer. So he declared to a friend that his son Bryan was innocent, that he had not committed forced murders, and that a trial would clear his name. And we learned that, just after Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger were perfectly willing to implicate 4 innocent young men. Just think about that. 4 innocent young men were going to have their fingers pointed at them on international television by Ann Taylor and her defense team. If the judge had allowed that to happen, he didn't. He said no, but she was perfectly willing to do it. Just remember that. And Bryan Kohberger was perfectly okay with doing that as well. So a couple of weeks ago, this is according to Vicky Ward and James Patterson, Bryan Kohberger's defense team phoned Connie Saba. Now, Connie is the mother of one of Bryan Kohberger's only childhood friends. His name is Jeremy Saba. Now, he passed away of too much medication, watching my words, in 2021. Now, this defense team member that talked to neighbor Connie, he wanted to know what she remembered about Bryan Kohberger's behavior and mental health. And I'm thinking that this is Ann Taylor's private investigator, because the defense team members that we've seen have been female, but I know the private investigator is a male, and he's not being characterized as an attorney, just a defense team member, which is why I think that Ann Taylor's private investigator went to go talk to Connie. So the defense team member asked Connie, that's just my opinion, they were looking for ways to avoid capital punishment. Now, obviously, they achieved that through the plea deal. So this was before that. So they talked to BK's friend, Jeremy's mom, Connie, and she said, she described Bryan Kohberger as strange. She said he was strange, silent young man. And both of them, she said that he was impressed with her popular athletic son, and both of them had learning disabilities, and both of them had turned to medication, self-medicating. I'm watching my words. So learning disabilities. So that is something new that we didn't know. We had heard that Ann Taylor got him diagnosed as autistic while he was in jail, but this is the first time we've ever heard that he had any type of learning disability. So I'm just wondering, why wasn't he also diagnosed as being autistic as a child? Why did they have to wait until he was in jail for that? I mean, Marianne worked with special needs kids. So was this something that she missed? Was she in denial? It just seems like a lot of things that could have been handled, maybe things would have turned out differently had they been handled, just simply weren't. But Connie, this is from Vicky Ward and James Patterson. Nearly 2 years ago, Connie, the mother of BK's friend, and Vicky Ward spent a day driving around the utterly bleak neighborhood in the Poconos that Bryan grew up in. It's a bedroom community. There's nothing for teenagers to do. No movie theater, no restaurants, not even a bowling alley. Connie, who was a teacher, showed me the bike trail and other places where she believed Jeremy and Bryan would buy their medication. And I'm watching my words here, from the type of people who would sell medication. Not legal, right? She showed me the house next to hers where Bryan grew up. And so I saw the path where he'd come through the trees to spend time with Jeremy. Connie told me, so she's talking to Vicky Ward here, that when Jeremy went over to the Kohbergers, he was never allowed inside, which she thought was weird. And I just have to say on a personal note, I agree. I think it's super weird that they never allowed Bryan to have his friend Jeremy come inside. And it just makes you wonder what was going on in the Kohberger home. I mean, both of his sisters, Amanda and Melissa, became mental health professionals. And Bryan Kohberger got a bachelor's degree in psychology too. So what was going on behind closed doors? Will we ever find out? But let's continue on with what Vicky Ward and James Patterson wrote. She said they also showed Vicky Ward the garage door, which Bryan had broken into her house in August of 2016, the day after Jeremy was arrested for the first time for DUI, driving under the influence, and medication possession. So I imagine what a betrayal it would be to find out that your son's best friend is willing to break into your house and steal from you. I mean, just absolutely creepy. Vicky Ward and James Patterson wrote, Bryan by then was a user himself and had phoned Connie to say he was sorry to hear about Jeremy's arrest. He asked her solicitously when she'd be visiting Jeremy in jail because he said he'd like to go visit him too. And in my opinion, this shows just how manipulative Bryan Kohberger really was, even when he was in his teen years. Let's continue with the book. So Connie had given him the time she was going to the jail to visit Jeremy. And then she gets down there and she's wondering why Bryan didn't show up. Until that is, she gets home and discovers that someone has broken into her home in her absence and stolen her iPad. So this is me talking. Bryan Kohberger was stealing from Jeremy's mom while he's in jail and she's at her lowest. And Bryan Kohberger says he, wants to visit Jeremy in jail, and it's just all a ruse so he can break into her house and steal from her. So I just wonder if he was ever held accountable for anything. What do you guys think? I feel like there was some enabling going there, and should his record have just been expunged, or should he have been held accountable? I think breaking into somebody's house is egregious. I just imagine if it's you and someone breaks into your house, how violated you would feel. So Vicky Ward shares that Connie knew at once who the culprit was. And a year or so later, this is really creepy, you guys. Trigger warning. A year or so later, Connie, was standing in her kitchen. She turns around and there is Bryan. Not at the doorbell, not at the door, not ringing the bell, not knocking. He's in her kitchen. She hadn't heard him come in. Now he claims he came there to apologize. And he was in rehab for H addiction. And Connie said that, she thought it was atonement, that's a, critical step. But in my personal opinion, I think for all we know, he could have been in there for some nefarious purpose, because wait, it gets worse. And wait till you hear what Michael has to say to Connie recently. But I think it's really creepy that he's didn't knock on the front door and she let him in. He's just in her house. So Connie says she never heard from Bryan after Jeremy passed away. She wondered if he was the person who would call her on her cell phone with heavy breathing. So let that sink in. He was just standing in her kitchen. We now know what he did to Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan because he admitted that he did it. He signed a confession and he pled guilty in court to it. But now we find out he was in her kitchen without knocking, without being let into the house, just in the house. And then she's getting phone calls while she's trying to grieve the loss of her son, and he's heavy breathing on the other line. So basically, she's being harassed by this man. Connie continues, he had always been a strange child. His mother, Marianne, told her he had Asperger's. I just wonder if there really ever was a diagnosis or if this was Marianne Googling symptoms. Because if he didn't have if he had a childhood diagnosis, why in the world would Ann Taylor have to go out and get him a diagnosis while he was sitting in jail? I think there's a lot of denial with Michael and Marianne Kohberger, but wait, it gets worse, because in 2024, Connie runs into Michael Kohberger, Bryan's dad, and here's an excerpt from the Idaho 4 of their conversation. As Connie Saba is shopping at the Rite Aid in Broadheadsville, she sees someone in the pain relief aisle who looks familiar. She stops. Is this someone she used to work with? And then she realizes it's Michael Kohberger, Bryan's dad. He says, "Connie, is that you?" She said, "How are you, Michael?" He seems pleased to talk to someone. And she says, "My heart goes out to Marianne." This is what Connie says. "How is she?" And Michael tells her that his wife doesn't talk to anyone, even on the phone. He said, quote, "We lead a very quiet life. We don't go out. And even when we are at home, he says they don't feel safe. People," he tells her, "are watching our house." And she says, "What people?" And he says, "Government people," leaving Connie slightly confused. And he said, quote, "Bryan didn't do it, right, Connie?" Connie thinks, and she says, "I know Bryan wouldn't do it," because she's trying to be supportive here. She doesn't want to be mean. So what's missing in this conversation with Michael? There's no concern or empathy for the fact that Connie has lost her son, Jeremy. Not one word has been spoken yet by Michael Kohberger about Jeremy. It's all about himself, Marianne, and Bryan. So it makes me wonder what was going on in the house. And then Connie told Vicki Ward that it's then that Michael seems to remember that he hadn't spoken to her since Jeremy passed away. So they never reached out to her when her son passed away. And he said, so this is in 2024, but her son passed away in 2021. He then suddenly says, we were both shocked to hear Jeremy died. Marianne wanted to call you, but she felt unable to. He doesn't explain why. Well, that had to have made Connie feel just great, right? She wanted to call you, but she wasn't able to. Why? How hard is it to pick up the phone? If you didn't feel like you could call someone, you could send a card. You could send over a plate of food. You could send over a bouquet of flowers if you don't know what to say. Well, let me get back to the book, because I think there's a lack of empathy for this family, in my opinion. And even from the Kohbergers, like refusing to say anything when their son pled guilty, that would have been the time, in my opinion, for them to say, we are heartbroken for the victims. No, not a word of that. Just leave us alone. Just leave us alone. Was the gist of it. We want privacy. We want time to grieve our loss, which I'm not saying they didn't lose, but it's not the same when you can still visit your son in jail. You can still talk to him on the phone. You can still wish him happy birthday. It's not the same as the parents of Kaylee and Maddie and Ethan and Xana. So then Connie asks, does Bryan know that Jeremy died? And Michael says, Bryan was away. He doesn't say where. He just says he was away. We didn't tell him for months, but yes, he knows. So again, Bryan Kohberger didn't reach out with one word of empathy for the loss of his best friend either. And I still do not believe he was standing in her kitchen out of the goodness of his heart. So he didn't reach out to Connie to show empathy or compassion for Jeremy, that his best friend. He broke into her house. He allegedly called her and heavy breathed into the phone and harassed her while she was grieving the loss of her son. And no member of the Kohberger family, not Michael or Marianne, could be bothered to send a note, send a plate of food. That would just seem like the minimum to me. That would be like a kind thing. If you don't know what to say, you could send a note. If you want to be a little nicer, you could send over a plate of food. If you wanted to be really nice, you could pick up the phone or send some flowers. So Michael says, Bryan wasn't the same after the medications. I'm watching my words. He wasn't the same person. Connie nods, but she thinks even on medications, Jeremy had remained sweet and good-natured. But then it gets even weirder because he says, but Bryan was framed. And Connie's startled. She said, framed? And so now we see this conspiracy nonsense beginning with Michael and Marianne Kohberger. They're not only eating it up, but they're going to spread it around to their neighbors, that their son could not have done it, that somebody's watching their house. He had to be framed. Now, even the president of the United States believes Bryan Kohberger did it. And he can see everything, all of the sealed stuff. He can look at everything that we haven't been able to see yet. You know, if they were going to frame Bryan Kohberger, why not make it look good? Let's spread his DNA around the crime scene. Why just a little bit on the inside snap of the knife sheath found underneath and to the side of Maddie? Why not have it on a door jamb? A few more places. So no accountability. But Michael continues. I mean, if they wanted to frame Bryan Kohberger, they could have gotten Dylan to pick him out of the lineup, right? Instead of just saying he had bushy eyebrows, they could have had her pick him out. So then he says, somebody planted the knife sheath. Remember, these people were completely prepared to implicate 4 innocent young men as alternative suspects. 4 innocent young men were going to be named and dragged into court as alternative suspects if they had had their way. He said someone planted the knife sheath. The police didn't find out about it when they first went in. There were lots of medications in the house. That's not true either. A lot of people around. They only looked at Bryan, how he likes to drive around when he's nervous. Connie doesn't. But Michael tells her he used to always get in the car and drive at night when he needed to think or he had some fog. He had to get away or just think, or when he couldn't sleep, he would just drive around. So Papa Roger, I believe, is very likely to have been Bryan Kohberger. I think it was, in my opinion, Bryan Kohberger. But it makes me wonder if Michael and Marianne have been in our chats too, interacting with us on Facebook, helping to spread conspiracy nonsense, because he sure seems willing to spread it around his neighborhood. He said things will come out at trial. Everyone will see. Well, that didn't age well, did it? Because Bryan Kohberger pled guilty. He did away with Kaylee. He did away with Maddie. He did away with Ethan. He did away with Xana. He signed a confession. And now we have the president of the United States saying that, he feels like Bryan kind of got off easy. He didn't say it in those words, but he, felt like at least Bryan should have to say what he did. So let's listen to Vicky Ward. She spoke out about this on Facebook. Let me see if I can get this to play.
Hey everyone. So one of the first thoughts I had when I learned about Bryan Kohberger's astonishing sudden guilty plea was that only last summer in the Idaho 4, we report that his father, Michael, told a family friend that his son was innocent and that what happened in that house in November 2022 had been drugs related and that Bryan would be exonerated at trial. He also made some strange claims about he believed the government was watching his house. You can read that excerpt in a sneak preview in my newsletter today. The Idaho 4 is now sadly likely to be the only definitive account of Bryan Kohberger's psychology, given that despite the best efforts of the Gonzalez family, he's not likely to be made to explain what he did in the courtroom. Stand by for more.
So I just wanted to share that little clip with you because I think that there is a national conversation to be had about this. I think, I just took this down by mistake. I think that we do, this has sparked a national conversation around this and what type of accountability people need to have for their actions. And was what what Bryan pled guilty to, is this enough? Is this enough, or should there have been more? Should there have been more accountability on his part? You guys, I could all hear it. I hope. I didn't even ask you. Could you hear that okay? Just want to make sure I didn't play it. And you guys are like, what? Could you hear it? Just a quick yes or no? Yeah, the mother and father are the ringleaders of the circus. I just wonder if they've been, helping to spread all the conspiracy. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for modding today. Much appreciated. Michael, yay. Okay, thank you. Crime Doc says, do you think Bubba will ask Bryan? Talk about the judge? I don't know. Leslie said, I'm sorry, I can't read the chat. I sat on my glasses. Oh, no. Maybe get a pair of cheaters to just kind of get you through that are close to your prescription, so you can, don't have to wait a month. I know insurance can be a pain on that. Lainey says, I agree not to knock, but it's fair to ask for transparency and responsibility. Yeah. Google user says, Stephen Stern's change of plea hearing was the same yesterday. He just said yes and guilty. Right. That's pretty standard. And we're going to talk about Stephen Stern's today. After I'm done with this live stream, we're going to go over there and talk about that. But I feel like there is a national conversation that needs to be had. I think it's been spearheaded by the Gonzalez family. So I did message Steve on Facebook yesterday. I left him and Christy too, of course. I'm not sure which one runs the Facebook page. Maybe I don't know, but I did message them and say, I hope you guys change your mind and that you do decide to speak out. Because I do feel like there's some important things that need to be said, and maybe it won't help Kaylee. Of course, it's not going to help Kaylee, Ethan, Xana, or Maddie, and it's not going to fix what happened on this. But maybe it can prevent another family from having to go through what the Gonzalez family has gone through, where Steve, said he felt like he had failed his daughter, and of course. I didn't ever think that. I always thought that Steve and Christy were excellent advocates for Kaylee and Maddie and Ethan and Xana, for all of them. They've been very outspoken. They've been, pushing hard for transparency this whole entire time. And I think we do need to have a national or international conversation, because I think this probably goes on in other countries too, about balancing out the rights of the perpetrator with the rights of the victims. And in our court system here in the United States, I don't feel like, in watching how this has all gone down, I don't feel like this had to go down like this. I think that there could have been a couple of things that could have been done. One is, I think that the family members deserved a personal phone call from the prosecution prior to announcing the plea deal, rather than emailing them. They could have emailed and also had a phone call. Two, I think if I were the prosecutor, I would offer to sit down with them with the discovery ASAP, as soon as the judge allows, and go through it with them. And maybe this is already happening, but it seems like that would be another thing that could be done to help them to understand what happened. That's really what he wants to know. Steve Gonzalez says, I know my daughter was done away with. I don't know how many times she was stabbed. And not everybody needs to have those details, but some people do, to stop wondering and stop worrying and stop to be able to get the closure. Obviously, Steve needs those details. So I think it's really important that he has the details. And I don't think he should have to read about it in the news or find out about it on TV. I think he should be able to go through it before the judge releases it to the public. The family member should have the opportunity to come in, sit down with the prosecutor, and just go through everything. I know it's a lot of terabytes, but the prosecutor could, know ahead of time of what the family wants to see and just have that stuff ready for them. and then, allow them to come back, for a day or two after to go through as much as they want to, what they want to see and what they want to go through. Tammy says, when the kids grow up, never being held accountable, they will grow up thinking they can get away with anything. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it just doesn't seem like there was accountability. His best friend passes away, and the parents don't even think, maybe this would be a good idea if we send a note. I mean, the fact that she never heard from them. And then Bryan, they finally did call the police when he stole his sister's cell phone. But then, it all gets expunged. And I do think people should have chances to start over, but I think there needs to be accountability. And the fact that Connie was standing in her kitchen and this man, Bryan Kohberger, just showed up, didn't knock, just was in her house, had to be extremely jarring at the time. And I just wonder what she thinks about that in retrospect, now that she knows what he did. And this backs up the WSU colleagues' claims. I've had some of the people that, have tried to say, oh, she's just doing it for attention. No, she's not hasn't done anything for attention. She hasn't given one interview. She hasn't said a word, except to police. But she hasn't done anything to get attention for herself. That's ridiculous. She's saying this because this is what happened to her. And she deserves to have some compassion for what happened to her. She shared an office with this man who should have never been given a job at WSU. And he stole her key from her desk, from inside her purse, went to her house while she's at work at WSU, goes in, takes a watch and some paper and moves some stuff around, enough to freak her out. She's trying to get security cameras installed, and he offers to help her, and then uses the security cameras to spy on her. That's some next level mastermind. And it's, the same thing he did even in high school. You could already see him starting to work out how to take advantage of people, finding out that Jeremy's in jail. Okay, Jeremy's not home. What time is she going to the jail so I can break into her house and steal her iPad? And that's what he did. This is not a good and decent person. He wasn't a good and decent person then. He probably was never a good and decent person, because good and decent people don't break into other people's houses and steal their stuff. Good and decent people don't steal their sister's cell phone and then take it to the mall and sell it. Imagine if that's your cell phone. Imagine all the data that you have on your cell phone. And if somebody just took that and exposed you in that way. It's not just the loss of a, $1,000+ phone. It's the loss of your personal privacy, your data, your pictures, your passwords, whatever you have on there. Nunya says, most narcissistic defendants smirk when victim impact statements are read. Well, we're going to be watching him. We're definitely going to be watching together. Jody says, no empathy. I agree. Penny says, all these evil monsters have the same look during the victim impact statements, just hard, empty stare. Yeah, that's pretty much what we got from him. And Donna says, Ann Taylor was all in for the money. She rode that train as long as she could, right? Leslie said, oh, yeah, can we get it? Yeah, if you're watching, please give this a thumbs up. It lets YouTube know that I'm doing a wholesome show, that I'm not using, I really watch my language in case you guys have little ones in the room, but also because I respect this platform and I'm really proud to be part of the YouTube community. Nor a scholarship, exactly. This is our other head mod, Amelia. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're doing the Stephen Stearns next, because I want to talk about Jennifer Soto tonight. Thank you. She says, Leslie was 271 on the thumbs up. Thank you for that. Super creepy. You're right, Michael. Kim said the parents want so desperately to believe Bryan Kohberger to be innocent. They'll say anything to put doubt in people's minds of Bryan Kohberger's guilt. Yeah, I have no doubt that when the private investigator, remember Ann Taylor said they were having trouble getting people to come forward? It's because they're not going to come forward and lie. What is Connie going to say? He broke into my house. He stole my iPad. They can't let that on the stand. There was nobody that wanted to stand up for Bryan Kohberger. And it just makes me wonder, who else had he wronged in the past? While she's grieving the loss of her son, she not only doesn't get a note or even a sympathy card from any of the Kohbergers, including Bryan, but she then has to tolerate him calling and breathing heavily into her phone, just harassing her while she's grieving the loss of her son. Jet said, I wish that Ann Taylor would be brought up on sanctions for all of her unnecessary motions and delays that were absolute nonsense. Kelly said, little kids will, I don't think she will, and I'll tell you why. I don't think anything's going to happen to Ann Taylor because they don't want this to be over. The powers that be in Idaho that allowed that crime scene to be torn down, that allowed the trial to be moved from Latah County without even trying to seat a jury to Ada County. The powers that be do not want this to be overturned. I don't know if anybody wants this to be overturned at this point. So they're not going to bring into, nothing's going to happen to Ann Taylor. Nothing. Did she walk? And I don't even know if she crossed the legal line. Did she walk the line? Yeah. The whole super secret, everything's secret, and not disclosing that it was secret because the defense team requested a gag order. The prosecution agreed to it and the magistrate judge put it in place. That's not this judge keeping it super secret. That's not the prosecution keeping it super secret. That was the gag order put in place at the request of Ann Taylor. So she was really pushing conspiracy nonsense. Callie said, little kids will take things, but once you get to a certain age, you know better, and there's a deeper issue. Exactly. At what point do we start to hold people accountable? And would this have been the end of the world if this had been on his record? No, because he wouldn't have gotten hired by WSU. Maybe he would have taken an online job at home and wouldn't have hurt anybody. Pierce said BK frightened females at WSU for following them to their car and went to University of Idaho to stare at females. Yeah, he was harassing them. She could have been a victim. Yeah, he was in the house. Remember, his parents got called out to the Dana Smithers grand jury. Nothing happened. But somebody was wondering if it was Bryan Kohberger. Jody says she will continue to make money, in my opinion. Oh, yeah, she's going to keep going. She didn't get sanctions, and she's not going to, guys. I'm just going to put it out there right now. Florence, thank you so much for the $2.99 super sticker. That is so kind and generous of you. And thank you for being a channel member for 10 months. Wow, thank you. Thank you to all of our channel members. Florence said, I'm glad to be part of the Reporter Room family. I'm glad you are too. We really are a true crime family here on YouTube. And I also have a Facebook group too, if you want to connect even more. I don't private message on Facebook. If you want to private message me, you can do that on Twitter. But I do have a group on Facebook, and we, if I'm not here, I'm probably there. Helga, thank you so much for the $1.99 super sticker. Helga Shabba Ding Dong says, just found your channel and love it. Well, thank you so much. That is really, really kind of you. And Yella says, great community, and gave a £1.99. Thank you so much for that. So £1.99. Thank you so much for your kindness. That is really kind of you. I'm putting that toward a new camera. Top Cat says, whoop, I just missed it. Top Cat, I saw your comment and then I clicked it and I lost it. Top Cat, if you want to drop your comment again, I would love to share it. I was going to share it next. I found it. Hold on. Top Cat said, are his parents still saying he's innocent after the plea? No, they haven't said that, but they also haven't said sorry to the victims either. I didn't hear any words of empathy from the Kohbergers toward the victims' families. I doubt, this is my opinion, I doubt it even crossed their mind. Just in hearing how they treated Connie, it didn't even dawn on them to say that, in my opinion. Lady says, I know a lot of people that had medication issues that acted that way. It's everything in combo, in my opinion. It's a violation. Penny says, my cousin stole my watch and gave it to my sister. She had already moved from home. Thieves are all around you all the time. That's really sad. I'm so sorry that happened to you. So sorry that happened to you. And I want to welcome Lulu, who just became a Reporter Room channel membership. Thank you so much. That is so nice of you. And before we get to the end, let me just take this down for a second. Thank you, Lulu. I do want to say thank you to our producers. I'm too slow. All right, let me try one more time. Ed Jazz, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Christy Valentine, Michael L. Cole, and Jen Lynn too. Thank you to our channel members. Thank you so much for being part of this. Now, tomorrow, we have a show planned. I'm going to do a pre-show. We're going to start 11 a.m. I might start a little bit early if you guys are here hanging out in the top chat. I might get started a little bit earlier than that and do a little bit more. But we're going to start at 11. Bryan Kohberger is going to be sentenced, and we're also going to be hearing from the family members that want to speak. Now, Olivia Gonzalez, as of right now, is planning to speak on behalf of the Gonzalez family. I don't know who's speaking on behalf of the Laramies. I don't know who's speaking on behalf of the Kernodles, but I do believe that the Chapin family is not going to be speaking out. They feel like they have the closure that they need. They want to move forward. They have two of the three. Ethan was a triplet, for those of you that don't know. And I also want to give super thanks and coffee gratitude to Michael Cole, Donna Bravo, Veronica P., and gifted channel memberships, NJazz, Kaylee, and NJazz. And let me just finish this out. Veronica P., Michael Cole, and Winsong, and Donna Bravo, and Michael Cole. Thank you so much for your kind super stickers from the last live stream that we did. I do update channel memberships the day before the next live. So if you are a channel member today, like Lulu is, your name will be added for tomorrow, because we're going live tomorrow. And I could see Northbin's Girl gifted 5 channel memberships. I don't have it saved. Let's see if I can find it. I got Lulu. I could see Northbin's Girl gifted. If anybody could find that and help and star it for me. There she is. Okay, I've got it. All right. Thank you to Northbin's Girl for gifting 5 Reporter Room memberships. That is so kind of you. Thank you so much. So let me write this down for tomorrow. All right. I have to write down the gifted channel memberships because those don't generally show up on YouTube. I have to find them in the thing. And a couple of times I've had to go back and scroll through trying to find stuff, but everything else that usually tells me about. All right. So tomorrow we're starting at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So that will be, I believe Ada County is on Mountain Time. So that's 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Christy said, thank you, Northman's Girl. Welcome to the family for those who receive those memberships. Yeah, if you receive those, please make sure you say thank you. Sue Joy said, I believe Bryan Kohberger was a ticking time bomb. What's my name is Karen says, what was the breaking news? I'm late. You'll have to back up the chat because we're just finishing up here. You can always back up the live stream. Did you know that? You could just click on the live and you can scroll it back and watch the beginning. But I usually, you guys know, I generally open with whatever the most important thing is. I don't always know ahead of time what you guys are going to think is most important. So I go with what I think, and sometimes that's different than what you think, but I try to lead with whatever I think is the most important. Thanks to Reporter Room, Yellow says, for a great live and great mods, great chatters. Thank you so much. And Michael says 8 a.m. West Coast time for the live stream. All right, so we've given 3 different time zones: 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. West Coast time. So East Coast time, 11, 8 a.m. West Coast time. And we're going to be watching Bryan Kohberger. We're going to be watching the family members. We're going to see Bryan Kohberger in a jumpsuit tomorrow. And we're going to finally get to hear what the family members said. So come on over with me. I'm going to be talking about Jen Soto and the Stephen Stearns plea next, because Jen didn't show up. And we're going to talk about why that happened. And Amelia says, thank you, mods are us. Yeah, if you modded today, come down and say hello. Let me thank you, Njaz and Michael and Amelia, our 3 head mods. Thank you to Christy. Hi, Susie Q. Jess said, my daughter was born in 73. There's Enjas. Thank you so much for modding. If you're a mod, if you want to drop me a comment, I can show your name if I haven't thanked you already. If I have, yeah, Destiny's like, oh, 8 a.m. It's gonna be the most important hearing that we have, though. Thank you for modding today, Wicked. Linda says, wow, she's probably on her way to Mexico. All right, guys, I'm gonna be heading over right now. We're going to be doing a very important live stream on the Madeline Soto case. Jennifer Soto did not show up for her daughter yesterday. We're going to talk about why that is. I'm not shocked, but I do want to talk about it. And tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time is going to be the most important hearing that we've had in the Bryan Kohberger case, because we're going to finally hear from the family members. And maybe we will also hear from Bryan, and we're going to find out what the judge sentences